You're listening to Trust Talks and Digital Dives with me, your host, Joni Brennan, President of the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada. We feature industry leaders, policymakers, and innovators who power our economy and protect our data. Whether you're a technology professional, business leader, or just curious about how digital trust transforms our world, we connect you to the insights that matter. Let's dive deep into digital trust. Hello and welcome to Trust Talks and Digital Dives. I have a fantastic set of guests today and an exciting topic in terms of delivering trust and assurance into the ecosystem. It's a great opportunity to talk about how we're navigating digital trust, and our guests today are from Treefort Technologies and their recent certification against the DIACC PCTF and for identity verification. We've got a great set of guests here, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves as we get going. So let's do that. Let's do around the room, and I will. I'm going to start with the person and organization who's achieved the certification. So let's start it off with a bang with you, Jay. Would you please introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them about why this is important for you?
Perfect. Joni, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this. So my name is Jay Rochelle. I am a lawyer and I'm the Chief Legal Officer of Treefort Technologies. Treefort is a digital ID company offering identity verification services primarily to Canadian lawyers and notaries. Joining me today are Caitlin Clark and Kristen Dawson, who are part of our customer support and marketing teams. Glad to have them with us in case we get into any of those tangents.
Amazing. It's like, there's always a good team behind every success. It's rarely a solo effort. So that's great to hear. Welcome, everyone. And then let's go a little bit through the process in terms of how it typically flows. So organizations going through certification often benefit from support. So along that journey. So let's toss over to you, Steve. Could you introduce yourself and your role in this equation today?
Sure. Thanks, Joni. My name's Steve Panifer. I'm the Managing Director of a firm called Hyperion. I'm based in the UK, and we are specialists in payments and identity, members of the DIACC, and have been involved in the whole kind of progress and development of the framework in Canada for many years. And so our role here is as a readiness assessor. We're providing advice and consulting services. We're not part of the audit process. We're strictly separate from that, but we can help those organizations to get through that process more easily.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. Welcome. So let's toss over to you, Ray, and please introduce yourself and your role in this ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Ray Kimball, CEO and founder of KUMA, and we are a member of DIACC, also a certified auditor, and we're also certified as a readiness provider for folks that we don't audit, so that those services are separate. And just excited to be here. KUMA has been around for about 11, 12 years now, and really privacy and security and identity focused. This is kind of what we do, our DNA. And we also have experience in identity framework development and also identity audits in other jurisdictions as well, including the US and the UK at one point.
Yeah, amazing. And thanks for calling that out, because the information security side of auditing is kind of one thing, and then there's definitely specialization there in the identity space. So great that you call that out for your area of specialization over at KUMA. So that's great. Thanks, Ray. And Ruth, how about you?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Ruth Puente. I lead the DIACC certification program, and with different mechanisms that we built for this program, we try to help building trust in the Canadian ecosystem.
Amazing. Thank you, Ruth. Thanks for saying hello. So with that, we've got a great conversation planned here. So let's start with you, Jay, and let's talk about, could you explain for the audience how your services help to mitigate fraud and how the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, or the PCTF, adherence is a way to enhance effectiveness for your organization?
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll start by just giving you a bit of background, and that'll lead into the answers to the question.
Yeah.
So I'm, as a lawyer in private practice in Canada, one of the things that I wanted to be able to do was to meet with my clients virtually to sign documents. The Canadian legislation is behind other parts of the world, and so it's actually really hard. But one of the things that the lawyer needs to have if they're going to meet with their client virtually is you have to have a way to verify your client's identity in accordance with the rules that govern lawyers. Coincidentally, the client ID rules for lawyers mirror the FinTrack client ID requirements, but we have to operate within this little framework. So what we did is we set out to build that little, what I call IDV widget. And what it does, or what the Treefort platform does, again, quite simply, is allowing lawyers and notaries, and I guess other reporting entities, to verify the identity of their clients in accordance with the rules. And this is where there's a little bit of a nuance, Joni, because as you'll know, the rules actually set a very low bar on what you have to do. So just a compliance with the minimum requirements of the laws, it's a compliance check mark, but it doesn't actually do anything to stop fraud. So what we did is we built the Treefort platform to meet those minimum requirements and then build on top of it. The jargon that's used in the legal sector to describe this is called multi-factor authentication. And in this context, what it means is doing multiple checks in addition to the minimum that's required to verify someone's identity. So what our tech stack does is it does a number of checks still within the parameters of the rules, but more than the minimum requirements. And so that's the first part of answer to your question, Joni. The second part, you're talking about how the DIACC certification helps us leverage or further our vision. And really the answer to that comes down to trust. So these rules for lawyers have been in place for a long time, but prior to 2020, virtually every interaction a lawyer or a notary in Canada would have with their client would involve a physical proximity meeting. So in other words, the client would go to the lawyer's office, you'd sit across the boardroom table, you'd talk about the transaction, and the lawyer would say, "Can you please give me your ID? I need to examine it, take a copy of it." And that's how they would verify the identity of their clients. Because of that, because that's the way it was always done, nobody actually prior to 2020, looked at how you would do the digital equivalence of that physical proximity meeting. And until we came along. And then, of course, COVID happens, and we have this rapid acceleration in digital meetings. At that point in time, we were able to go to lawyers and say, "Hey, you can use our tool to satisfy your client ID obligations in virtual transactions." And they'd say, "Great. How do we know that what you're doing complies with the rules? How can we trust your system?" And it really what it is this is all new to lawyers. That they'd never experienced the technology. They had no idea what digital ID was. They had no idea how to do a credit file check. Like, how do you actually do that? And so what the DIACC certification does for us, Joni, is it's a way for us to give comfort to the people using our product to say, "Listen, we have met this standard. We have been audited by an independent third-party auditor who has come in and looked to make sure we're meeting this standard." And through that process, our clients, it builds a level of trust to say it's not just Jake, Rochelle, and Treefort telling you that we're good or we meet a certain standard. We now have this independent certification, and that carries a lot of weight, Joni, especially in the legal sector, because they're all about security and compliance and trust. So at a high level, that's what the DIACC certification does for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about, so many transactions within our economy, especially the ones of value, they often start with or have a lawyer somewhere in the middle there. So if you've got a weak point at that point in the transactions, not to say that it is weak, but that could be a place where somebody tries to inject fraud, locking that down in every way possible while putting convenience for the lawyer and for the client, this is like the best place we could be. So.
And exactly, and Joni, this is why it's so critical, because in Canada, unlike other jurisdictions, whenever you have a transaction, a house purchase, somebody's buying a business, somebody's selling some assets, the money flows through the lawyer's trust accounts. So the lawyers are at the center of the moving of the money. So of course, the fraudsters are after the money. So that means that the lawyers are a much bigger and juicier target for them than other people like real estate agents or mortgage brokers. And so that's why the legal sector is centered to this discussion. But again, it's all new, it's all foreign. And to develop that level of trust, that's where, again, where the DIACC certification comes in.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Jay. And I think kind of where we left off right here as well is ultimately the beneficiaries from this are safety in our economy and our ecosystem, and for lawyers so that they can say, here's products I can choose that they've been verified, you know, that I'll have that risk has been mitigated in those products and verified by a third party. So it takes a lot of work and teamwork and partnership to remove complexity from, let's say, a lawyer who already has a pretty complex job on their hands. So amazing. Thanks for explaining that so clearly, Jay. I'm going to toss over to Ray, and I would like to ask you if you could talk about particularly the PCTF audits and what role do the audits play against PCTF? What does that contribute in terms of fostering trust? Like, how does that mechanics actually work for bringing trust into the ecosystem?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm kind of gonna tackle it slightly different. Just Jay hit on some really good points about just overall trust and why it's important to the ecosystem and the role of the third-party auditor. Even going back, I think it's important to look at how the PCTF was even developed. You know, for a number of years there, as Jay indicated, there's hasn't been kind of a third-party oversight really focused on identity transactions in the digital sector. So, you know, we started this a little bit through work with many of the experts in DIACC, actually starting in the US at one point, and brought that expertise to the Canadian market. And we, and so a lot of the experts that were on these boards and these working groups developed a lot of the criteria and the requirements based on a lot of local laws, regulations, best practices, and spent a lot of time, months, if not maybe even longer, in developing the
continuing
right.
in terms of improvement and evolution. Yeah,
100%, and it should, you know, because the market's always evolving.
That's
so
right.
The requirements also have to evolve, and so you had a bunch of experts that kind of sat there and really did a lot of work and hard work and developed these requirements so that organizations that went through the certification process understood what the requirements are. And there's also a robust third-party auditor program where folks like us have to, you know, prove every year, you know, that we're capable of conducting these audits. There's standards for how we conduct these audits, and as well as, you know, the readiness advisors with Steve's company. So, you know, I think that in and of itself provides a lot of trust in how and why this certification process is important, because it was non-existent and now it exists, and organizations are going through it pretty regularly now, and trying to really differentiate themselves because they're being audited by a third-party independent organization. The other part I kind of hit on too, which touches on your point you just made around the evolution of the marketplace. You know, this is not a one and done. This is not a one and done audit. You know, we know that identity services change, the market changes. So what the PCTF also has brought in is this ongoing audit process. So it's a 3-year cycle. So these organizations are not just, we come in and we look at it once, they're approved for life. They have to re-up every year, and they have to prove themselves that their practices, you know, have been you know, up to the standards, so to speak. And so that's another piece to the PCTF that is extremely important, and all of that encompassing this overall kind of trust and confidence that you have in organizations like Treefort.
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of it was interesting to hear that explanation and the teamwork element, both from the teamwork and how the criteria were developed in the Canadian ecosystem, how that drew in and continues to draw in from other jurisdictions, the US, the EU, Australia, and other places around the world. And then how that helps to elevate the services that become certified, and that it's also a continuous process because the whole ecosystem is always changing, whether it's now we have AI, soon we'll have quantum, then we'll have post-quantum. So these are things, it is a process over time and not a point in time for security, for trust. So thanks for that great explanation, Ray. And then kind of on that note, I want to turn over to Ruth, and particularly how does the program as a whole, and the way, because we haven't, and we also need to talk a bit about how the program has been built and how it operates, and also the approach and how the PCTF is built with those criteria. How does that actually help to elevate the standards ecosystem, knowing that PCTF complements technical standards that are out there? It's really more process-based and outcome-based. How does that help to elevate the whole ecosystem from a standards perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So yeah, I mean the program that DIACC has created to demonstrate the conformity to the PCTF is I mean is based on different aspects and also phases. So to provide assurance to the different relying parties that that a product or a service like the Treefort has been subject to rigorous process, including an audit, but also additional phases to provide that confidence to the Treefort customers and interested parties that that they meet the requirements of the applicable component. In this case, has been the verified person of the PCTF. And so through different phases that we built, addressing and reflecting the ISO requirements in relation to how to build a standardized certification process, including a third-party audit, and also different pillars like a third-party review of the audit findings as well. That's basically add more layers in terms of confidence. So based on ISO 17065 and also 17021, we built this standardized tool for the different Canadian companies like Treefort to show that they adhere to high level standards. They have taken care of making the homework, the good homework of trying to ensure that all their policies and their service meet the specific rules of the identity proofing areas that the verified person addresses. So that basically helps with a trust mark that is a mark of conformity in relation to, in this case, a PCTF, basically gives a very positive signal to the market saying, okay, they meet the requirement, then went through this process, and they help succeed on meeting and gone through those requirements and different activities. So I mean, the different phases include the application, but then of course the audit is one of the most important parts of the certification process. But and then the auditor, like KUMA in this case, they perform different activities, making sure that all the evidence that in this case a Treefort provider could be validated with different techniques in terms of the audit, including observation of the practices, reviewing the policies, making sure that they are in place, and also testing the system, interviewing the staff, observing how the practices within the organization is built, and also then trying to validate by that combination of techniques that that the company really meets the in this case the verified person component. So so that's of course not only provides assurance and confidence to the market at the Canadian level, but also I mean this program is also in the radar of other relying parties in other jurisdictions or regions around the world. So that helps also to elevate the digital economy confidence on different digital transactions. And so in this case, we also build the trust from the international point of view, working from the Canadian ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the the interoperability side of the how the program works, and you talked about the set of requirements and rules and processes, it's like sometimes when we think interoperability, it can be easy to narrow that down to the technology layer of interoperability. How did, we're both using particular tech, is it talking to each other, is it working? And sometimes overlooked is the trust interoperability. You might have the best tech, but if you're not verifying the information that goes into it, or you've got poor processes at your organization for how you're managing it, you're still opening risk into that ecosystem. And so interoperability actually has multiple layers to it in a trust ecosystem. So thanks for that great explanation, Ruth. Let's go over to Steve. Definitely, I love the team thematic here and how the teams come together to make all this happen. Trust is a team sport. So Steve, let's go to you. And, from your perspective, how does working with a readiness advisor, what's been your experience working with organizations who are going through this, and what does that readiness advisor collaboration help bring to the certification journey for an applicant?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the starting point is to think about what the framework is itself. So the framework describes the processes that you need to go through to deliver some part of a digital identity system. In this particular case, we were talking about the verified person component, which is that IDV process that you go through to establish who somebody is. And the framework gives a very good decomposition of the different components that you'd expect to see there. But it's kind of inevitable that every system, every real kind of service that's built is not going to be exactly the same. Things come from different places. So for example, the sequence with which you do things might vary. The data sources or the evidence sources that you're using to support an identity claim, those things might vary as well. And so when you read through those the requirements that are laid out in the framework, then I think it's helpful. I mean, what we bring is we were actually part of and we helped to author parts of the framework. We know what's meant by certain statements within the framework, and so if a supplier comes along or a vendor comes along and says, well, I do this, but I can't quite see exactly how it matches to what's written over there, we could say, well, okay, this is what was meant. We could help you understand it, and then maybe take what you've got in your system and either find the right way to describe it so that it fits with what's in the framework, or maybe identify gaps, or it's those kind of things really. And I think there's that helps the framework as well. It helps the DIACC, because every time there's an organization that's interacting in that real sort of practical way with the framework, you're learning, you're providing a feedback loop which will enable the framework to improve in the future. And as with all these things, to what Ray was saying, really, we don't live in a sort of static environment. We live in an evolving space. The framework, as it stands, lays out a set of processes that you need to adhere to if you're going to meet a particular level of assurance. But things change, technology gets better, processes improve. And so you can expect that over time, the framework will itself evolve, and the interaction that vendors have with the DIACC, with the help of readiness assessors, is all part of that ongoing kind of evolution and conversation.
Yeah, all the pieces of the puzzle. And so for people who are listening or watching, I think it's important to also note that the framework itself is built as a tool for auditors to go in and do that work of measuring, is this, are we meeting what's in the framework? And so sometimes if we have people who are not auditors who look at the framework, they say, well, we're not really sure how to make sense of this. And what is this? We
Yeah.
say, okay, yeah, this is really the tool that auditors use. And this is what you're going to be audited against. And that's all out there and transparent. Anybody can access it today and have a look at it, for free. That said, you noted that there are, and part of being a qualified auditor is making judgments on has enough evidence been provided for a particular criteria. And the framework is not a strict blueprint. Otherwise, we'd have all of the same services over and over and over again.
Exactly.
The point is, yeah, we can have different kinds of services solving the problem in maybe different kinds of ways, but the spirit and the intent of what's in the criteria has to be shown with evidence that criteria is.
And that's the way the framework should be, because it then encourages innovation. People can come up with new ways of solving the problem. If the framework was too prescriptive, then that would be a bad outcome for the economy as a whole.
Absolutely. And it's a dance that we continue to do on how prescriptive is the framework, because sometimes folks want it really prescriptive because that's maybe easier to follow. And then how much room is in there. And that's why we're always doing quality assurance and working together to thread the needle on the right layer there. So let's
Hey,
turn
Joni.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Ray.
So I was going to add in on that. I think a great point there, and another part of the framework that's important is the oversight committee.
Yes.
Because it's not just an auditor, Steve or myself, making that determination. We're looking at a lot of evidence, a lot of process, a lot of interviews, but then we also are provided oversight, and so we have to provide those findings and recommendations to the board, and then they're looking at it, and they're also asking their own questions. So there's a strong trust fabric built in throughout all the processes of the PCTF, that people should have a lot of confidence in. So.
Excellent point, Ray. And in the English language vernacular expression, we would call it eating our own dog food. So the organization DIACC, who is operating that certification program, we have our own quality assurance review that we do as we say, okay, what's worked, what are there areas that can benefit from improvement, and our independent review board is part of that process as well, making sure that we've all follow the processes that were prescribed. And if we've learned something through that journey, which we always do, how do we feed that back into the loop cycle for that continuous quality assurance and continuous improvement? So on all sides of that equation, we're all continually operating for quality assurance, which is the point of the effort. So thanks for that great point, Ray. I'm going to toss over to Jay. And so look, I think we've talked about the value of a certification and going through an audit, but at the same time, there can be some tipping points of what makes an organization say, okay, I'm ready to do this. This is important for my organization. So what's been that tipping point for Treefort?
So I'll answer your question, Joni, but I do have one comment just to follow up on.
Yeah,
so,
please do.
What we did is we hired Steve and his team to help us prepare. And I just want to make the comment that that was an excellent experience for us. Even though there's a cost associated with that, our experience is that the benefit far, far, far outweighed the cost. It was much more efficient for us to go through that process with Steve's guide and his team's guidance. So if someone were to come to me and say, Jay, what's your advice on how to the most efficient way to get through this process, I would recommend hiring someone like Steve and his team. And I also want to comment, because we're talking about partnerships with Ray and his team, even though we don't retain them as our auditors, they were excellent to deal with. Going through a process like this is stressful. And there were a couple of times, I will be honest, where my stress rose to the surface, and Ray and his team were really good about, guiding us through that and giving us good advice. So just on that point, these partnerships for people getting into this process, just to make the point that they'll be in good hands with these people. So coming back to your question, the tipping point, and I'll be completely honest, the single biggest thing that motivated us to get the DIACC certification was that our competitor Chicago Title did this. So Chicago Title with their VerifID process was the first company to go through the DIACC or the Voila certification for verified person. They are a competitor of ours in the market. And as soon as they did it, they started marketing the heck out of it, and it got traction because I talked about that trust piece. And so they are gaining market share by the fact that they were able to say, we've got this and no one else does. And just, we're a for-profit business. We want to have a competitive offering. So despite all the other advantages, Joni, that was the tipping point. Another thing, again, the secondary answer to that was the effect that this has on our clients. And actually, I'm going to bring Caitlin Clark into the conversation here just to comment on, because she deals with our clients directly every single day, and she also handles our marketing. Can speak to this better than I can. So Caitlin, maybe if you can talk for just a couple of minutes on the effect that the DIACC certification has had in your discussions with our clients and how we've marketed it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, just like you've said, Jay, clients really want to know that their data is secure and that their privacy is protected. And that really is the core of what we do. Having industry recognized certifications, such as our DIACC certification, really reinforces that commitment. It validates that we meet rigorous security and compliance standards and really gives our clients confidence that their information is being handled with the highest level of protection. And so we've proactively communicated our certifications and security measures to reassure clients that we are working with a verified, trustworthy platform that meets these industry standards and best practices. And what that really does is position Treefort as a reliable partner in ID verification. And again, it's just going back to giving them that confidence that they need to integrate our technology into all of their workflows. We've been actively marketing this across all of our platforms, website, LinkedIn posts, webinars, and even direct client conversations. And again, just to really position Treefort as a leader in secure identity verification by highlighting not just our technology, but also, again, the trust and compliance that the framework that supports that.
Yeah. And Joni, I'll just jump in with one add-on. I know this might be a little off tangent, but another part of our motivation is the verified person, but also those people watching this podcast might be aware that DIACC is working on what I'm calling an add-on of the Law Society profile. And this is an additional set of criteria that are specifically designed to relate to or complement the client ID rules published by lawyers. And at some point this summer, hopefully those criteria become an auditable standard. And again, at that point, we will be one of the first companies to go through that additional audit process, because it will give a materially meaningful comfort to our clients that we're doing everything that needs to be done to satisfy the rules of the law societies. So a little bit of a teaser there, but that's also part of our motivation, Joni.
That's awesome. Thanks for that very, full and detailed response, and from Caitlin, what's been the reaction back in. And, it's interesting, or maybe interesting for people like us or people who join this podcast, but I was having some conversations with folks in agriculture and food yesterday. And one of the themes that came out of that was, especially in an ecosystem that is reasonably decentralized, federated and decentralized, meaning we've got collections of governments and collections of industries. Interoperability and innovation tends not to happen as a flip of a switch across the entire ecosystem. It tends to happen with pockets of, and even in the agriculture and food ecosystem, the folks who are all working on seeds, they all got together and figured out what they needed for seeds, which wasn't terribly different than the folks who were working on sheep. And now they're figuring out, okay, how do we work together? And I think we can say the same thing, arguably, on the identity layer, which is in almost every industry. It's been wonderful to see the forward pressure of the legal sector, rightfully so, as professionals at the front line of transactional trust, and how that's driven interoperability, and as one of the major areas in Canada that we've also been learning from back for you. What are those individualized requirements? And they're not too far off from the baseline, but that ability to adjust for adoption for particular needs of an ecosystem without lowering the bar, that's a key on building trust across a complicated landscape. So thanks for that full breath answer, Jay. Okay, great. Then I'm going to turn over to a combo here between Ray and Steve. Based on your experiences, as actually being part of the operators of the program on PCTF, and what the process is like, do you have any key insights that you can provide for other organizations who are looking to achieve the trust mark, and kind of what should they be thinking about as they consider pursuing certification in the ecosystem now?
Well, I'll jump in. I think my advice is start early. What we're talking about here is not some big overhead you've got to do in addition. This is the normal best practice that you should follow. If you're building your system properly, you want to, from the beginning, understand the requirements that system needs to deliver to. We're talking about systems here that are identity systems. They're the things that are in place to prevent fraud happening. They're important systems. You need to build them properly. And so to do so, you want to make sure that you're taking a proper measured approach to that, doing the design properly, thinking through the requirements properly, making sure everything's done well. If you're doing that, then you're preparing for an audit at the same time. So I would say start early. The framework, the PCTF gives you a framework, a guide that will help you through that process anyway. And then it becomes just a natural part of what you're building. It's like the old security by design thing, right? So security is not a thing you think of at the last minute. You build it in from the beginning.
Absolutely. How about you, Ray?
Yeah, no, I mean that's I 100% agree with everything Steve just said. I think the other note I would throw out there are that the PCTF requirements, they weren't built in a vacuum, and so they do actually leverage or build upon requirements from other existing audits, whether it's SOC, ISO, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that it's important for organizations that are considering, jumping in and going through to get the trust mark, to start early, like Steve just highlighted, and realize that as you're going through other audit activities, that this can be layered in at the same time. And in fact, there's probably efficiencies on the client's part to do them kind of in conjunction and together, because you're providing some similar evidence. The people are the same people involved on the security and privacy side within your organization. So so I would say that tackling these with some of the other audit efforts is also probably a good way, rather than trying to bolt it on later and reissue some of the evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So I think speed and starting early would be my advice as well. I love to hear Jay's comment too about the market reaction and what's driving these audits. I'd love to see that too from just the business standpoint, because these are all for-profit organizations. So
Joni, I'm jump in here just
go for it. Yeah.
The other thing I would suggest, again, in response to your question, is we have found being involved in DIACC, becoming familiar with the ecosystem and having the opportunity to even contribute to the discussion around the criteria, be involved in the committees, that laid a solid foundation upon us for us to build on. I think that you'd be at a slight disadvantage if you came into this ecosystem cold, out of the blue, not having the background about what's happening, or how to Ray's point about how the framework was actually developed, the different components of it. So the thing I would add to the response that Ray and Steve made is that getting involved in DIACC, participating in it, familiarizing yourself with the ecosystem can be a good first step to getting into the audit before you get into the audit process.
Right. Yeah. And we're a reasonably friendly bunch. So you'll find a lot of folks that are, doing things similar to you, and maybe folks who are doing different things. And that's all going to contribute, to the gestalt, the greater than the sum of the parts, in terms of how does this come together and what benefit you get. And I love that we Steve, you touched on, because I said, okay, PCTF is a tool for auditors. It's also a tool for builders. And so as you're going in, you can say, here's what I need to be looking for the best quality assurance in my service, which is an important feature as well. And the comment that, this has not been done in a vacuum. So if you're going through other audits, this work is going to help you do better in those audits. Your previous audits are going to help you do better in this ecosystem. So it's all about a culture and a practice of trust and quality assurance in everything that you do. And, that's our duty as service providers. And that's also building great customer relationships and having more partnerships and helping to lead the way on the market. So fantastic answers all around. We're coming to the end. Ruth, any final words on advice for organizations who are considering getting involved?
Yeah, so firstly, I would like to thank everyone for making this this process improve, because each of the parties have contributed to inputs from the perspective of a continuous improvement, and also bringing feedback to our technical committee as well. So I think that's very valuable, and we appreciate, because that's the way to move forward. But in terms of preparation, yeah, I mean, usually the rules, I mean, of course, that's are based on existing standards, and DIACC has leveraged that. But sometimes people believe that the preparation is quite quick, but it's important that the provider understand the rules and the requirements. So when they need to provide the evidence, that response could be quite quick, and also the quality of and accuracy of those responses can be better driven through the process. So I suggest that the providers take time to understand and get familiar with the PCTF itself, and identify according to their functionalities which is the best component, and then try to get familiar with the processes that are addressed in the conformance criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like going through the certification is not just a simple checklist. It very much means something substantial when an organization has gone through this, and you will be able to very likely work your way through the process. There's homework involved, support involved, and provided that you put in that effort and that teamwork, you have a great chance of going through this program and being successful. And that has a big meaning when it comes out at the end, because it's not just a self-asserted process, and it's not just a checklist, that you're saying, oh yeah, we did it, sure we did it. So that is real. I am so grateful for the opportunity to host this conversation. You may have seen me drinking coffee. I think we have 4 different countries in this room, 5 if we consider Alberta being on its own journey. I'm just kidding, Jay. We've got Western Canada, US, UK, and Spain. So it really is an international, interjurisdictional effort to make this happen. And we do collaborate as this group here and so many others, all in the interest of reducing risk, increasing security, increasing simplicity. And it takes work to make something very hard look very simple at the end of the day. And all of you put in the work and the effort. So I'm very grateful to host you today. Thanks so much for a great conversation, and congratulations again to Jay and the whole team at Treefort.